another conversation with the family business. This is a rather unique chat with Brooke Story, who I've wanted to have on here since I saw her at MedTech Women. Brooke, thanks so much for coming on. I'm really looking forward to this.
Oh, me too, Matt. Thanks so much for having me. I was excited to hear from you.
Yeah, it's after 22 years of doing this, it's not too often that I'm blown away where I don't know what to say. And after your speech, I don't know if you remember, but I stood up and asked the question but it took me about 2 minutes to get my words together. And I did. Let me start there. Do you know when you've put a room on its keister?
I could feel it. Yes, I do a lot of talking. This is the most personal discussion I'd ever had in my life. I have been talking with MedTech women for a few months about potentially speaking and didn't know if I would be able to get through it without crying
Well,
or being too emotional. So I could feel it, and I was glad because I really want, first of all, our industry to know how wonderful it is, right? That we are doing things that change people's lives, that save lives. But I also want us to know that we have to democratize access. It would be better for everyone. It's better for the industry, it's better for patients, and that it was the most stunning experience being on the side of a patient, for me going through that with my sister.
yeah. So we've got a lot of context to fill out for people.
Yeah.
And so why don't we take a step back and just do a quick snapshot of a minute of who are you? What are you doing at the moment? And then we can unpack all of these things that make you a bit of a unicorn.
Yeah, that's what I'm called. Thanks, Matt. I am Brooke Story. I am married to a wonderful guy named Keith. He's a professor.
Of what?
Um, he's a professor of marketing and supply chain and
He's a
does,
DBA?
yes, he's
Yeah,
a
me too.
PhD.
Me
He's a
too.
PhD and
Okay.
an MBA, and he teaches business school. So he
Huh.
teaches for Mississippi State virtually right now, which is a
Wow.
wonderful thing for us. And he talks about the integration of the supply chain and marketing and how that impacts the success of a firm, of a company, which I love, especially in 2021 when we all went through those supply chain issues. So Keith and I have been married over 25 years. We have three kids, Tyler, who is 26, Alyssa, who is 24, and our bonus, who is Bridget, and she is 15 in high school. So, I'm a family person first, and also I have an identical twin sister with whom I'm incredibly close. When I was growing my career, Courtney moved to Minneapolis to help me take care of my bonus child, Bridget, and is really one of the reasons I'm able to do what I do outside of the home. For my job right now, I am still working at Becton Dickinson. I've been here since 2021. I was leading a variety of businesses. First, the integrated diagnostics business, which was Vacutainer. If you've ever had your blood drawn, you've had a Vacutainer draw it, and the diagnostics business. That was a really big, fun business to run. 4 to 5 billion at the time, and then went back to my roots in med device and was leading up the surgery business until Courtney had a stroke, and I'll talk about that more later.
Yeah.
And um, and then I left the company for a little while to organize my life, and then recently came back as BD announced the acquisition of Edwards Critical Care business. And it's a big carve out. It was a $4.2 billion business, huge opportunities for improving patient outcomes and care. And so I'm leading up that integration for the company right now.
Folks, she's underselling it. Let me just tell you, there are some people who just they take a conversation by storm, and everybody I talk to says the same thing about Brooke. What'd you think? I'm like, I don't know what to think. In 20 years of thousands of people, I don't think I've ever met anybody like you. So I'm excited about being able to share this with everybody. So tell me a bit how this all starts. You went to school in Tennessee, right? Rocky Top?
Right, go Vols. Yes, I'm a Vol for life. When I was a kid, I knew I loved math and science. My family did not know anything about engineering, but my aunt, who took my twin sister and I in when our parents passed and got sick, she worked at AT&T, and T,
Okay.
and I got exposed to engineering. And I was really like, I think I can do this. Very fortunate to have been exposed and had mentors as a very young person. And then as I mentioned, well, I mentioned this, my mom and dad had passed. And so when I was going to college, I'm thinking I have a lot of money saved, like $500. It wasn't enough even when I went to college. But the University of Tennessee had a co-op program where they would allow students to work. And Bell Labs was looking to partner with the University of Tennessee's engineering program. And so it was perfect. They were struggling to get, at that time, students to come from Tennessee to New Jersey because those are two very different places if you've been. So they decided, okay, we'll try to get some high school students from New Jersey to go to the University of Tennessee and co-op. And so that's how I got to go to Knoxville. And it was the best decision ever. I was able to put myself through school. My twin was going to Wellesley, and I knew I could help her out going to Wellesley because I had gotten into Tufts and thought about going there. But she and I were talking. I was saying one of us, has to be able to work and help the other one out. And then I'll go back to school after if I need to. So that's how we worked it out because she really, she wanted to be an English major. I was like, you better go somewhere good. And I was going to be an engineer. I was like, I can go anywhere. And so I went to Tennessee, loved it. That's where I met my husband. He was also a University of Tennessee engineer. He was my roommate's mentor. And we did not date each other in college. I could not stand him because he was not organized. And he was late to our meetings to study. And so I was like, we're kicking this guy out of the group because he's late and I've got things to do. I was working at Dillard's, I was working at Days Inn reservations, and I'm like carrying an engineering load. So I was like, he's out. He likes Star Trek. I swear to God, he was missing the meetings because he was watching Star Trek. And I'm not exaggerating. He still loves Star Trek. So these are things I should have known. But when we left school, we started dating. And so that's how I got with Keith. And then after that, Keith and I got married. I worked in consulting at Anderson Consulting at the time before it became Accenture. Great, great exposure. And it's how I got exposed to healthcare. So I did about 5 years at Anderson and worked at a company called Cention Bioservices that created products for hemophiliacs. And it was because in the late 80s, a lot of the hemophiliac population was wiped out with HIV because the systems weren't set up to capture the result of an HIV test. The systems were set up to capture the results of hepatitis. And so I really understood. I remember doing that project saying, this is what I'm going to do with my life. Like I just knew. I was like, I'm going to do med tech. And that's that. Like I'm going to just keep asking for these types of projects. And I left Anderson because Keith and I decided to get married. He was going to grad school. We started a family, and I couldn't travel 100% of the time. But then I was really fortunate. I literally was like one of the first persons in the late 90s to apply to Johnson and Johnson online, and they hired me. So I ended up working at J&J for 5 years, and then it was my turn to go to business school, and I went to Michigan and then left Michigan, went to Medtronic for about 15 years, and then came to BD.
It's about 30 things to talk about there, Brooke. You're spinning me. So what I love most about you, I mean, because I am the same, and I guess people love when they hear things that validate who they are, is for me, family is just first, second, last. There is nothing in between. My friends are family to me, so I put them in the same group. And to hear about, I didn't know your parents passed, and I didn't know that you and your sister had to make that decision about schools, because that comes into play. And just without making you uncomfortable, the concept of sacrifice is prevalent throughout your life. I mean, and I don't think you do it either intentionally or for any kind of accolade. It's just kind of the way you're wired. And I bet Courtney's wired the same way. It's a two-way street. So
Absolutely.
So you had mentioned it earlier, and I want to make sure though that we don't lose sight of what I really wanted to understand from you is what happens after you have a stroke. Because I've done dozens of conversations with some of the brightest minds in stroke, but never really talked to anyone who lived it and had to deal with care, and when it happens at that moment, how that feels, and then how do you build a life after that? Not just for this person, obviously, but for yourself and all the caretakers. So I'd like to focus there, but let's give a little context. Can you take, and I know it's hard because it's such a great story, can we encapsulate it a bit into a couple of minutes and say, look, this is what happened, and then we can expand on the piece that I want to probe at, because we didn't really talk about that at your conversation at MedTech
No,
Women.
we didn't. It was still all in flux.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So stroke. So let me give the context on what happened. My identical twin sister and I are incredibly close. I It was a very weird time last November because I was supposed to be doing a meeting in Rhode Island because that's where Legacy Bard was based, and Tom Poland was coming up to see our strategy. He called me that earlier that week. They said, we're moving the meeting to New Jersey. I said, fine. So my team, were like, yeah, cancel everything, drive everything down to Jersey. We're heading to Jersey. My sister lives in Jersey City. She was a lawyer for Earth Justice. She was a vegan vegetarian, and she ran about, 25 miles, 40 miles a week. Was the healthiest person I knew. She and I met for dinner the night before. She'd been suffering from a headache for weeks. She thought it was a migraine. She'd suffered from migraines her entire life. We left dinner that night. And again, I'm here because God made that happen, right? That Tom needed to move the meeting. And I called Courtney. My team says, Brooke, are we going out to dinner? Because my whole leadership team was with me. And I said, no, I need to see my sister. I could just feel something was up. So Courtney and I call her, can you go to dinner? Yes, let's go. We went. She said, I cannot shake this headache. I said, do we need to check your blood pressure? Do you need to go to the hospital? No, they'll just think I'm a migraine sufferer. It'll be a waste of time. We literally drove to CVS after dinner and bought a blood pressure cuff and aspirin. This is amazing. So she goes home. I text her, did you make it home? Yes. Okay, great. I know you have a big day tomorrow. Me too. We'll catch up after work, right? Because we both have big days. We talked about it. Didn't hear anything until the next day. Her job calls me and they call me. I'm actually talking to Tom. I don't take the call. They text and say, we've not heard from your sister all day. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I knew right away something was wrong. I didn't know what. So I called everybody I could that I knew and said, has anybody heard from her? No one had heard from her. And I called the Jersey City police, like before I left Becton Dickinson, and said, please break into her house. And they were like, lady, you're nuts because you said you were just with her last night. I just said, I know for sure something's wrong. And they agreed to do it, thank God. And her boyfriend actually came over from Manhattan and met the police, and he had keys, but she'd thrown a lock. You couldn't get in. So she'd had a massive stroke. And when they got in, they found her on the floor, incapacitated, couldn't reach her phone because it was on the bed. She'd gotten up to deal with a headache and collapsed, didn't know she'd had a stroke. I was on the phone with them when they broke in, and I heard her speak. And I said, I knew right away. My dad also had had a stroke, and I found him too the morning
My
after
goodness, Brooke.
when I was 13. So, and he could
Jesus.
speak though. He said, Brooke, I've had a stroke, call Mr. Howard, who was a friend who was like family, as you mentioned. So as soon as she spoke, I said, oh, give Ruben the phone back. I said, Ruben, take the phone to your ear. And he took the phone. I said, tell them she's had a massive stroke. And that's when I texted Stacy Pugh. Um, Getting through that was just the emergent part of stroke. And again, this is where this blessing of our industry and the privilege of working in our industry, the privilege of being able to text and call people to get help saved her life because she'd had a carotid artery dissection. It had completely dissected, which means that artery that brings oxygenated blood to your brain was just an open highway. So her blood pressure when she took it the night before was super low. So she didn't think she was having a stroke, but she knew something was really wrong. With that, it was a really big clot the size of a dime, we found out this year. And so the whole right side of her brain was impacted. I spoke with the surgeon that we knew that Stacy had connected me with, and a gentleman named Dito, who's the Northeast Sales Regional Leader at the time. And this doctor said, let's try to save the back part of her brain. Let's see if we can get it done. And so when we did the thrombectomy to take the clot out of her brain, that's when she hemorrhaged. And that's super critical. That's where really high chance of not surviving, particularly that 6-month period after a hemorrhage. But she had a cranioectomy. So if people don't know, that's where they take your skull off to deal with the brain swell so that you can potentially survive it. And then we put the brain back on in December of last year, and then she has survived. And it is because there are a ton of resources out there to help stroke survivors live and start to recover. It's hard to get access to. But again, this privilege I have of being in the industry where she got to go to Kessler Rehabilitation. And that is where Christopher Reeves, like when he was Superman, that's where he went in New Jersey. Courtney got a bed there and someone helped me get connected there. She got all of this innovative technology that helped her start to ambulate. But because of the damage of the stroke, she's still paralyzed on the left side. And the work from there was, working with insurance, dealing with the fact that she was going to lose her livelihood and not have a job, and getting insurance, disability from the government, and figuring out, does she have long-term disability? Will insurance continue to pay? How long can we have like COBRA insurance? How do you get approved for Medicaid? I mean, it was unbelievable, the post-stroke work. And it's why I had stepped down from my president role at BD, just trying to work through all of that. I was thinking, how do regular people do this? Like they must not get access. So that's the story of the context of kind of the stroke and how we've gotten to where we are today. She's paralyzed, but she is I mean, when you talk to her, you would never know if you weren't able to see her that she'd had a stroke because she's recovered so much cognitively. And she's she can ambulate, but she can't really walk. She can like bring her left side forward, which is where she was damaged because she had a right brain stroke.
So she can speak clearly?
Very clearly. Like I
Wow.
listened to a message from her the other day thinking, it's and there's moments that it's not quite as good, but if
Yeah.
she's concentrating, she sounds just like she did prior
And
to the
she could
stroke. And
use
she has
one
a
of her
very good
arms?
memory. I'm sorry.
She could use one of her arms?
Yes, she can use her. She had a right brain stroke, like very, very large right side issue. So her left side, her arm and her leg are paralyzed. She can, like I said, ambulate by throwing the hip forward. And this is because of these great innovations at Kessler and them really starting the work on her and keeping her in physical therapy and occupational therapy for the past year, literally. Um, so she can do that, but her right side is good. The problem is we're mirror image twins. So I am right-handed, she's left-handed.
Okay.
I was very, very scientifically process driven. She was very, very creative. Started out as a music major at Wellesley before she did English and became a lawyer. So she's able to use her right side, but it's a challenge for her.
Yeah. Understood. So I feel like I'm preventing people from hearing the whole story, and we'll let some of this come through the conversation. But I want to make sure I point to some of the people involved. Stacy Pugh is one of the toughest, smartest, most capable human beings in our entire industry. So just take 1 second and make sure, because I know she gets a little embarrassed in these kind of things, but I want her to get her
She's
moment.
phenomenal. So Stacy is so background on Stacy and I. We both were presidents at Medtronic at the same time, working on the same leadership team. And I am a huge fan of Stacy's. I always admired listening to her talk about how she built up some of the clinical evidence to have these stroke inventions on the market. Like Stacy was one of the people working on that. Um, and she literally answered my text before I got to the house where my sister was being pulled out to go to the ambulance. Before I even got there, within a second, I texted Stacy and she said, I said, I think my sister's had a massive stroke. Her response was zip code. So Stacy's brilliant in the neurovascular space. Stacy knows so many people in the neurovascular space. And Stacy started out as a nurse,
Yep.
which I did not know, but it really made sense because I could just feel her jumping into action to help me save my sister. And I'm literally forever grateful. And Stacy and I have been friends. We were friends before, right? We always texted each other. There aren't that many women med tech leaders that run businesses. And I think most of us know each other, to be very honest. So, I'm cheering for everybody and I feel as if they're cheering for me. But for her to step up like that and then connect me with a gentleman named Dito, and he's still at Medtronic,
Yeah.
getting me connected with surgeons, it was a blessing. So that's how she connected me. And again, this is my privilege, right, Matt? Like, who has Stacy Pugh in their text messages that can just type, my sister's had a massive stroke, zip code, this is the zip code. Will they take her to blah, blah, blah? No, we have to go to this hospital. Okay, let us work on that. And they got it done.
Well, what's interesting about that is I think everyone has a connection, not of that caliber, but Everyone does. It's just in that moment, your mind shuts down, and it's not panic per se. It's just, I mean, all the studies that show that when you get emotional, your brain, less percentage of it works.
Right.
You have less ability to bring in information. And that's why when people get really angry and they say dopey things and they get in fights because they're no longer taking in information. And that's the way your brain works. Back in the day, that's how it kept you alive. Now, we don't really
Right.
need that. Actually, you need to use our brain a little better at this
Right.
point. But it's an interesting exercise to do for everyone, even if you're not in medtech, to sit down and say, wait a minute, don't I have an uncle who does this? Don't I have a friend whose dad does this? You'd be surprised. Everyone has somebody who knows a police officer, a fireman, a physician, a lawyer. Everyone knows who's a lawyer. But
Right.
I really think that there is, but they don't think about it ahead of time. And you almost should have like a laminated list in your purse or your wallet that says, if I have an emergency, this is who I call. Because if you're not the one there, you're able to think more clearly. Like Stacy's not there, so she's able to say zip code. Whereas if it was
Yep.
Stacy's sister, although she's one tough as nails person, maybe she could, I don't know.
She
But
saved her sister from a similar stroke.
oh my goodness,
Literally.
what is happening here, Brooke? I didn't know that either.
This was years ago, but her sister, I think, had a hemorrhagic stroke years ago, and Stacy
Jeez.
identified it right away and got her the right treatment.
Well,
It's just great. Isn't that
yeah.
wild?
This
She won't
is
mind me sharing, I'm sure of that, but
no, she's unbelievable. So let's talk a bit about that, because so much of what I do is related to successes with medical technology and investments and all these things that I try to perpetuate how wonderful our industry is. But this is the other side of what makes our industry awesome. It's the pulling together. It's the everybody is on the patient side of how do we make this a better experience. So if you could give a little bit of context of after the stroke was diagnosed and the treatment began, because it's amazing what you all went through to get the proper treatment, the proper physical therapy, the proper placement into these places, that's one of the harder parts to do. So I know it's hard to ask that question because it's so broad, but just give a couple of minutes about, okay, this is what we had to deal with once we identified that she had had a stroke.
yeah, that was something. So first of all, again, I can't agree more with you about really, I want to tell everybody and amplify the point around know who to call and reach out. People want to help. I would help anybody if so please, I think that's a really important message. But once we knew there was a stroke and started heading to the hospital, I was in the ambulance and they brought Courtney in. They identified it I mean, you can ask somebody to squeeze your hands, and if they can't squeeze on one side, and they know, you've
Yeah.
had a stroke. So they were identifying that on the way into the hospital emergency department, ED, I'll call it. And I was riding in the ambulance because a coworker had dropped me off at the house. When we got to the emergency room, Stacy and I were texting, and Stacy was saying, go fast. You have to go fast. I'm also obviously texting with my cousins who are down the shore in New Jersey. If you're from New Jersey, you know what I'm talking about. My cousins and my family are down the shore. I'm texting saying she's alive, but it's bad. She's had a stroke. Stacey's like, we got to go faster, go faster, go faster. And so I go into the emergency room, and this is what blew me away is I remember going up to the desk and asking the young lady, oh, I need to go back to advocate for my sister. And I said this from the stage at MedTech Women. I'm very conscious of how I show up. I want to make sure that, especially as a Black woman in a city that has a lot of impoverished Black people, that I'm not coming off as aggressive
Yeah.
because I understand that. I've
Well,
worked
stop
in
for a
hospitals
second.
my whole life.
Brooke, how tall are you?
I'm like 5'6.5", 5'7".
Mm,
Yeah. I was very conscious and she said, no, you can't go back. She's talking. I said, oh, I know that, but we've established she's had a stroke, so her brain is damaged. Like, I would like to go back and advocate. No, you need to take a seat. My sister's boyfriend is police, so he said, come sit down. And I basically said, stay in your lane. Like, that was your lane. This is my lane. Like, stay in your lane. So I'm on the phone with my cousin who also works at a hospital, texting with Stacy, my cousin saying, try to calm down. Stacy's saying go faster, and I text her back, I'm trying not to get arrested because when I would not sit down, I was pacing and talking on the phone. The young lady at the desk called the police.
yeah.
They have police security at the hospital we were brought to. So And I at first didn't even realize they were there for me because I've never obviously had trouble with the police and I would never imagine anyone calling the police. So it was really insane because, again, this is one of those things that for people that are going into ED, you would never think this would happen. The reason I got back is because I'm texting Stacy and Dito saying, can you tell the surgeons to come get me? Because I can't get back because this lady at the desk, thinks I'm being aggressive and
Yeah.
asking to go back. But the fact that I texted that and I kept all those text messages, I was so happy later to remember the story. But again, the point here is continue to be persistent and try. Because once I got back there, it was great because the ED doctor who initially looked just shrugged his shoulders and said, it's done. He was on video. He was not in the emergency room. He was just looking at a screen of her CT scan and shrugging his shoulders, saying, too bad, like good luck. And she was curled up. Like that's how bad the stroke was. Like if you've had a really bad stroke and your perfusion is really low, your body starts to curl up. Um, and I remember just looking around for the Medtronic, the guys that I knew. It was Dr. Singla, Amit Singla, and her Dr. Nair. And both of them are miracle workers and wonderful men. So Amit Singla and Harish Nair, I want to tell you thank you as well. Thank you for saving her life. And they were great. They sent her to a perfusion room and they were interacting. They came back and we just let go to the person that was saying, shrugging his shoulders, saying it was over, and just said, what can we do to try to get her a quality of life that's worth living, right? That she would be able to have cognitive function and a chance to ambulate and not be in a 4-year lift for the rest of her life. And so that was a big deal getting that done. And then we went for surgery. And then, the other amazing thing was once she came out of the first surgery, she looked great. I had pictures, like she was breathing on her own, everything was fine. But I remember seeing her put her hand to her head. And I was like looking at the nurse saying, I wonder what's like, I could just tell something was wrong. She remembers everything. So Courtney was like, oh, I thought my eyeballs were going to pop out of my head because she was hemorrhaging. And then she went still. And the nurse, thank God, had this stroke specialist had been up there when Courtney came up from the first surgery, knew that as her pupil was getting bigger, one pupil's bigger than the other, that's when you know a person is having a hemorrhage, especially a person that's unconscious. And the surgeon was able to get back from his home and drive all the way back. And we met up in the operating room, signed off again, like have the next surgery. And then they kick you out of the ICU, which it never even occurred to me that was a chance she might not live
Yeah.
until that moment where they said, oh no, you have to go. Like, isn't she coming right back to this room? Which she did, praise
Yeah.
God. But they were like, yeah, no, lady, you got to get out. So it's one of those harrowing situations. And then we probably were 5 or 6 days in the ICU. But just talking to the nurses, I stayed there around the clock. I did not leave her side. My family, I mean, there were so many of my family that came up that, they had to limit who could come in because there's a lot of us. But she could hear from the day she came out of surgery. I leaned into her ear and I said, Courtney, do you want me to do everything possible to save you? If you do, squeeze my hand. She immediately squeezed my hand very strongly with her right hand. And later I said, do you remember me asking you that? Because she's obviously had some mental illness, challenges coming out of this, saying like, I don't want to live like this. And she said, I do remember you asking, Brooke, but you're in the industry, so you knew how bad this was. How was I supposed to know? Like, if you're in her mind,
How
she was like,
about
I have
giving
no
me some
idea. I thought,
context, Brooke? Yeah.
yeah, she was like, I thought I was just gonna get up and leave on Sunday. Like I figured they fixed it and I would leave. Like I had no idea. And I'm like in her ear saying, like, do you want me to intervene here? Like, because I will do everything in my
Yeah.
power, to ask and get you the best. And she was thinking, of course I want. What are you doing? Why would you let me die? Like, right? What are you talking about? And then later she was like, bro, like you can't ask somebody that question that isn't in your industry. Like, I had no idea how bad this
Do
was.
you think that she would have made a different decision if she had more information?
I don't. I
Doesn't
don't,
sound
because
like
her
it.
brain was never, like I said, she was conscious. She could understand what I was saying. She was interacting with me with her hand and the nurses. She was able to communicate to us through like squeeze my hand type things. We could ask her that because she was intubated for mercy 4 or 5 days. I mean, when she came out of that, that was what was crazy too, because she didn't go right into breathing distress, but later went into breathing distress. And then that's again, as a family member, you're saying, whoa, 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 whoa. Because if they call a doctor or a resident, and I won't make comments on residents, but they're just going to re-intubate.
Yeah.
And that's a bad outcome, right? You don't want that. So the nurses, we were all standing in the room saying, like, hold on, let's figure out what we can do to try to get her to breathe on her own. Because if she's re-intubated, I knew that would be a bad outcome. Everybody knows what happens, look back at what went on during COVID. So, we were really fortunate that the nursing staff at this hospital, the ICU nursing staff was wonderful. And obviously we're communicating with them. And then when she moved off the floor, her friends were saying, I want to send flowers. And I said, you know what? Send a wonderful array of Magnolia Bakery goodies to this team on the ICU floor. And oh, by the way, make sure they have a lot of that banana pudding, which is fabulous. I recommend it.
Okay. I'll tell you one
Yeah,
of
when
the
she came back, they remembered. They were like so sweet. They're like, oh my God, like you sent us stuff. And I'm like, we don't need flowers. I mean, we need you guys to keep coming to work to save people
yeah.
because, yeah.
When my dad had a sextuple bypass, he had he had 6 clots, and when he came out of his surgery, probably the most capable, credible person I've met in my life was his ICU nurse. Because in the cardiac unit, you get one nurse for one patient, and she's like, "I've got your dad."
Yeah.
It's funny; it's hard to even talk about. And she's young; she couldn't have been
Right.
more than 35. And I looked at her; I'm like, I have never been more confident in a person ever. I mean, she was like, "I got it,"
Yeah.
and he's 83, still with us today. Going to be 84 on March 1st.
Amen.
So,
Yeah, it makes a difference. There's a
oh,
nurse on this
it's
floor. Her
all the
name was
difference.
Christy. We all know her and love her, and she was going for her PhD. And she also, even when she wasn't on shift, she would make sure, when Courtney had that breathing distress, that we had a nurse that could get her through the night so that
Wow,
um,
that's extraordinary, Brooke. That's absolutely
it really
extraordinary.
was.
So, so fast forward a bit because there's so much to talk about. Could be here all day, but I want to get more up to date because I know that you've gotten to a point where things are at least progressing
Yep.
to a point.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
I'm curious, like, what it's like now, a year later, because your life, your husband's life, your daughter's life, who's still at home, and
Yep.
obviously Courtney's life. I'm curious how you all live in all of that while still having an unbelievably taxing job. Your husband's a professor, so he's got work, and your daughter has a
Yep.
life in school. Like, I'm
Yeah.
curious how
Yeah.
you balance all that and how Courtney's able to enjoy what part of life she can.
Exactly. So when she left Kessler initially, we had no place for her to go. And so for people that are dealing with this, my heart goes out
Yeah.
because it's not like there's just like, what do you do when someone's leaving and they're completely incapacitated? They just send them home. And so she moved to Baltimore with me with no orders because New Jersey doctors can't write orders for Maryland. So we got down to Baltimore in February of 2024. I figured out getting her into some doctors, and again, fortunate to have friends and family around here to call to get her in. Got her set up here until June. She did not want to be in Baltimore. This is not where her life is. It was very taxing on me and my family because, you've got a medical bed coming into your house. You've got therapists coming into your house to do at-home therapy. Then we start out of home therapy. We were getting transportation set up. There's disability transportation in Maryland and in New Jersey as well. But her whole life is in New Jersey. And she was saying, I don't want to be here. My life is in New Jersey and I want to recover, but I want to be in New Jersey. Her condo is a 3rd-floor condo overlooking the Hudson River in Jersey City, beautiful spot. That was going to work. The elevator's always out in this building. So I was like, Courtney, it's not going to work. So
Jeez.
when she was in the hospital, literally last November, a a 1-level, 2-bedroom condo came on the market. And she and I have been talking about buying something down the shore by our family. And I literally just made the decision last December to just buy it. I had my girlfriend's husband go look at the place, take some video,
Yep.
and I put in an offer and got it at a great price. Like it's fabulous. It's right down there in Eatontown. Shout out to Netflix setting up a production studio in Eatontown, New Jersey. Like good for the whole economy in the city. And our 90-year-old aunt who took us in lives in the same neighborhood around the corner.
Holy
And
smokes.
so all my cousins, a lot of family around there. So again, just a blessing. So I bought this place. We were going back and forth. Courtney wanted to visit New Jersey. I would bring her up. The weekend I got the call about the Edwards critical care signing that was going to go out. I signed the NDA to go under the tent, find out what was going on. Um, she had a fall at that home because she tried to get up and said, I don't know if she called me and I didn't hear her because I was sleeping or what happened, but she was getting out of the bed at that home, which was not a hospital bed, because the hospital bed was in Baltimore, and fell. And I could not get her up. And so she'd fallen here in Baltimore a few times, which of course you don't want your person to fall. But my husband got her, which was here, and my son, and they're strong guys. And my son is still in Baltimore. He's still at Towson University, my 26-year-old. So the two of them could just get her up. It was not working. So I said, we're going to have to call the EMTs. So we called them. And then Courtney, with the brain injury, like the first thing they say is, did you hit your head? And she was like, yeah, I always hit my head. Right? Because she's like, what the hell are you talking? Of course I hit my head. Like I went down, like you see, I'm on the floor here. So of course, then they're like putting on the neck brace, calling the bus. I was like, oh God. And literally, just so we know, she went to the ER. And from that night, it was about like 3 in the morning till about 8 a.m. Like that's when BD signed the deal. So someone was texting me because I was saying, did we sign the deal? Like, because I got some other stuff going on right now. So I can't really get online for a
Kind
few
of got my
hours.
hands full.
So I
Yeah.
get this ER ED thing, and they admitted her. But again, then that's when my friend calls and says, I have a person I can stay with her. That's when I talked with her. She was very cognizant. There was not a new stroke, thank God. And she said, yeah, I'd love to live down here. Like, I'll just come here. So then we made all the arrangements to move everything to New Jersey, set up care in New Jersey. She stayed in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And I, fortunately found this person, and I'm able to go back and forth and work up there as well because I have a great husband who's helping out with our daughter, and my son is here as well. So we got that set up, and then now her life is really, we're doing everything to help it expand. And I don't know if that makes sense, but if you think about from November 3rd of last year, of 2020, not last year, 2023, through when she came out of the hospital at the end of June, her life really was just trying to get some average daily living things figured out, how to eat, how to dress, like how to get help, making sure you're not falling. And now we've started things like for our birthday, we went to see Trey Crowder. He's a comedian that she likes. So
Okay.
we took her to New Jersey Pack. We're going to restaurants. This week she was out driving a electric cart at ShopRite in New Jersey. If you guys are from Jersey, you would know like it's their grocery store. So now her life is really starting to let's start doing things that you like to do
Yep.
before. Even though we go to all these doctor's appointments and have physical therapy still 3 times a week, which is also a blessing because if your patient is continuing to make progress, then the insurance will continue to pay for physical therapy. So
That's important
she's
to note. Okay.
yeah, she's cognizant too. So I tell her, and she's like, and so she'll text me every time she has a test. She was like, I crushed it. I did better. And I know she did. And her texts are sometimes off because she has a lot of vision cuts from the stroke. Like she can't see in certain parts of her eyes. And because of the brain bleed, she doesn't know she can't see. So if you or I were to cover a part of our eye, I would know like, oh, I can't, I'm covering my left eye. She doesn't know. So some of her writing is off, but she can dictate, and they're helping her learn how to do that with the occupational therapist as well.
I'll tell you, I could literally talk to you all day about this. I'm going to
We're
ask you
going to
something that
the
I've never.
opera tomorrow. I'm going up there so that she can listen to the Met Opera at
Oh, that's
Monmouth
even better.
University.
Which
Yeah, she
opera?
loves that kind of stuff.
Do you know which one?
No, I'm not an opera
Yeah,
person,
I
but
went
since she
twice.
is,
Not for
I'm
me
like,
either. Nah.
yeah, but
But
I'm like, hey, if you like it, I love it. I'm coming up there to go with you and enjoy some time with my sister.
so you're the first person I'm going to ask this of. We have to do this again to include more of the details here to provide some more context. You're the first ever part two that I'm ever going to do because there's just so much more here. So we got into some of the things that I wanted to, which is, what does it feel like? How does it affect the family? How does it affect everybody? But there's so much more nuance here. So we're going to do that in the next sit because
Can I add one more comment
oh,
on that
please,
though?
of course.
I think when a family goes through a tragedy like this and sees how quickly, in an instant, life can change for someone, and I'm going to get emotional.
That's okay.
It's at this point I feel like I get to do these things. It doesn't feel like I'm balancing a lot. I
Yeah.
feel so grateful to God that I'm able-bodied after seeing what it's like to not be able-bodied in America. I'm grateful to God that, I can spend time with my child and my husband and have this great job at Becton Dickinson because, the team and the executive team there is just so wonderful. Tom Poland, Mike Garrison, like these guys are just really, Rick Bird was helping me. They're just phenomenal people. And so rather than feeling like I had to balance a lot, I really shifted my thinking into saying, I get to do this, and what a blessing that I can just get up and go when I want to.
Well, the part that you're missing, and this is what makes you fantastic, is you reap what you sow. And these folks don't do this because they don't like you, because they don't respect you, because they don't love you.
Yeah.
I love that you're faith based. I'm not as faith based. I'm more of a I just hope for the best. But
Right,
I
right.
love that grounds you in a
Yeah.
very significant way. And I'll tell you, Brooke, I haven't met anybody who has anything negative to say about you. And I don't know if I can say that about
Really?
anybody else in this industry because somebody's got an axe to grind, but
Oh
not
my
with
gosh,
you.
your thing on LinkedIn, like my Mike Garrison, I was working for Mike says, Brooke, like this thing's blowing up on LinkedIn. I was like,
Yeah.
what? We weren't even connected, Matt. And I went and read it. It was so fabulous. And the comments, I was like, wow, like I owe Matt a thank you. So thank you for that,
Well,
Matt.
this is
I
what I'm
appreciate
trying to
it.
say. It's you. I'm
Yeah.
just the vehicle, and Courtney's just a
Yes.
vehicle, and all these other people are just vehicles to show who you are. But my guess is you're going to go the rest of your life without ever seeing who you are. So let me make sure I tell you before we break is that you are every bit as extraordinary and as deserving as all this is that comes your way. And Courtney's the benefactor of how much you're loved in the industry. And I'm thrilled to hear that she's making strides. And yeah, of course, it's going to be an uphill climb for the rest of her days, but at least she's got less of her days to do. So
That's right. She has a climb to have, and we're very grateful for that. And thank you, though. I really appreciate what you said. I feel like I pay it forward.
yeah,
There's been so much poured into me over my life. I've been so fortunate, great career help along the way from everybody for whom I've worked, Jeff Martha at Medtronic. I mean, I've been really fortunate. And then I really try to pay it forward to help all the people around me too. And like you said, then you're right, this thing just comes back. So I'm lucky.
yeah, well, in your case, you made your own luck, but I'll agree to disagree. I want to make sure that I am clear in my appreciation for having you on here, the message that you're sending, and what you're doing for people who are going to go through this. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much for being on this unique version of the family business. This has been Brooke's story.